Hakuna Matata. It means no worries.
Hakuna Matata. What a wonderful phrase.
Hakuna Matata. Ain't no passing craze.
It means no worries for the rest of your days.
It's a problem-free philosophy.
Hakuna Matata.
Hakuna.
Hello and welcome to the first tutorial on correlations. So by now you should have attended your lecture on Monday or Tuesday and your following workshop. You may have already finished the two examples in the workbook, but in case you just want to re-practice them or go through in your own time, this is what these resources are for. They're not a replacement, they are simply just a revision and reinforcement tool. So as you can see here, I've just opened SPSS and I've come up with what you'll first see when you click the icon. So I'll click that. I want to type in my data, press OK, and then close it down. So I can see now that my data set is all ready for me to start putting in my data. Okay, so the first question, this is taken from the Psychology Straight workbook. So apologies to the criminal behaviour or counselling students. It may be that I use examples from your workbooks in next week's session. But for now, if you haven't already done this one, it'll give you extra practice. So first of all, I recommend that you really read through the question and understand what the variables are. So a researcher is interested in finding out whether there is a link between IQ score and grade point average in university students. To calculate GPA, grade point average, she takes the average score from each participant's first year module results. She also asks all participants to complete a standardised IQ test. Data were collected from 20 participants at the University of Wolverhampton. The data were as follows. Okay, so what's really clear here is that you start thinking about what the variables might be. So we've got IQ score there, that's going to stick in our mind, and also the grade point average. So we seem to have two variables there that we're interested to see if there is a correlation. Okay, so you can see that our data set is ready. So remember from your first semester that we have two different kind of interfaces on SPSS. We have the data view and the variable view. So the very first thing that we do is we need to tell SPSS what the variables are that we're interested in. So if you wish to pause the video now to remind yourself or just to follow along with me, if you remember, the first variable in the study was IQ score. So we're just going to put that in. And SPSS doesn't like spaces, so we have to use underscores sometimes. Okay, so we need to make sure that it's got a numeric variable type category and click OK. That we have it to 1 decimal place. You can have it to 2 decimal places, but it may confuse you a little bit more. And then we need to decide what the measure of data is. So is IQ score measured on a scale, i.e. is it ratio or interval data? Is it ordinal data? So for example, is it rated or ranked in a specific order, like bronze, silver and gold? Or is it nominal data, i.e. is it categorical, for example, male, female? So hopefully you'll come to the same conclusion as me and recognise that it is scale data. And our second variable is grade point average. So again we just put in, you could just put GPA, that's fine. There we go. Again, check that it's numeric, just a 0 decimal place. And again, things were measured on a scale. So there we go. We've told SPSS what our two data sets are. If you look back in the workbook, they'll tell you that the data was measured on a ratio and interval scale. And that means that the Pearson's correlation is appropriate. Okay, so we go back to the workbook, and this is where many students may get a little bit confused, because we are almost led to believe that there is 3 variables here. We've got participant number, IQ and grade point average. Okay, participant number is irrelevant. As we put data into SPSS, it will number it for us. We just click back to SPSS, you can see, look, down the side here, that all of the rows are numbered. So going back to the workbook, we need to simply get this data into SPSS. So the lazy way would be simply just to copy, highlight them, right click and copy. Then go back into your data set, select, right click and paste. Okay. And then we need to get the rest. So be careful here. Again, we've got participant number. That's not a variable in the study. However, we need the extra 10 pieces of data sets there. So right click, up to copy, from 11, highlight, right click and paste. So this is absolutely fine to do this right now, but when you come to do your own studies, you won't just have data there that will be easy to click in. So that process often takes a very, very long time when you do your own research. But for the sake of this video, we're going to leave it there. Okay, so we go back. Okay. Okay, so we've already discussed that the data is of ratio and interval. Okay, so a correlation coefficient informs us whether the correlation between the two variables is either positive or negative. So if the correlation coefficient is nearer +1, we can say that there is a positive correlation. So as one variable increases, so does the other. And if the coefficient is nearer -1, we would say that the variables are negatively correlated. So as one variable increases, another variable decreases. If the coefficient is very, very close to 0, we would conclude that there wasn't a significant correlation. Okay, so if we go back to the output, we can interpret
Okay, so once you've done the analysis, you would then have to describe the results and present these into the results section in the practical report. So you would start off by outlining the variables in the study. So for example, the study investigated the relationship between IQ scores and grade point average. You would then present a scatter plot graph and make sure that you've got a clear title labelled Figure 1, a scatter plot to illustrate the significant correlation between IQ scores and grade point average. And with graphs, the title always goes underneath and is labelled as a figure. In text form, you would then state that the data was analysed using a standard Pearson's correlational test. The results indicate that there is a significant positive relationship or correlation between IQ scores and grade point average. We would then present the statistical notation. We would use R because that is the notation that is relevant for a correlation. Inside the brackets would include the number of participants minus 2. This is classed as the degrees of freedom. We would then present the correlation coefficients. So that would be 0.854. As we discussed earlier, that is a positive correlation. And then we would state the p-value. So if we look back to the output, we can identify that it is less than 0.01 and therefore it is significant. You would then go on to explain the relationship in quite concise wording. So for example, you would state that as IQ scores increased, so did scores of grade point average.
Okay, so you can see that I've put the two variables into SPSS here. So I've gone on variable view and I've inputted self-esteem and confidence. And because we've looked over the right words and looked and dissected the data, we know that it is of ordinal level. So you can see that under measures, both variables have the label of ordinal. So here is the second data set. So if you just want to take some time to put this into SPSS before moving on to the next slide, hopefully you should be gaining confidence. So here is the second data. Okay, so you can see a very important difference here. So instead of clicking Pearson's correlation, we've clicked the Spearman's box. And that is very important because of the nature of the data that we have been analysing. Okay, so again we need to look at the correlation coefficient. To go along, that is 0.746. So you need to think, is that a positive correlation, a negative correlation, or is it near a 0? Then we'll look at the significance value, the p-value, and determine whether this is higher than 0.05 or lower than 0.05. And then n is the number of participants that would take part, and we would include this in the statistical brackets -2, so it would be 32 minus 2.
Okay, so once again you would need to write this up in the results section of the practical report. So you would state that you conducted a study to investigate the relationship between self-esteem scores and confidence in academic performance. Again, you would present a scatter plot, so if you'd like to go back to the previous slides to go through that, and you would present that as before with a clear title placed underneath the graph. You would then state that the data was analysed using a standard Spearman's correlational test, and that the results indicated that there was a positive correlation between scores of self-esteem and confidence in academic performance. You may notice that the statistical notation is slightly different for the Spearman's correlation. So right by the R, we have got a small s. This is just to indicate that we have done a Spearman's correlation. Then you would present the degrees of freedom. So as we discussed before, this would be the number of participants minus 2. You would then present the correlation coefficient, that's 0.746, and then the p-value. So the p-value was less than 0.01. You would then finish by explaining the relationship. So for example, as self-esteem scores increased, so did scores in confidence in academic performance.
Okay, so that's the end for correlations for this week. I understand there's lots of information there, and it's been a while since you've used SPSS. Hopefully the workshops have been incredibly useful to you this week. If for some reason you haven't been able to attend the workshops, it is strongly advised that you attend, as you get one-to-one support with experienced members of staff. However, I will still be supporting your knowledge and your revision online every Thursday, so see you next week.